Ever since the Spin Chicklets episode came out last week, Mike Babcock's coaching career has been under a lot of scrutiny, and rightfully so. Since his initial departure from the Detroit Red Wings and then the Toronto Maple Leafs, lots of stories have come out regarding what he's done in his coaching career. All of the things combined are really making people question why he's still around the game and if he should ever have a chance to in the NHL again. The dude has a really old mind, and it's making him seem like one of the biggest bullies in hockey, and apparently he's just not a nice person on or off the ice. Over the course of his coaching career, he's made a lot of mistakes and has bullied a lot of people, players, and just other people off the ice. I'm going to break down all of the things that he's done so far, and if I think that he'll ever get another chance in the NHL. The short answer is no. A lot of the stuff he's done is really messed up, and I don't think he should be anywhere near the NHL again. For those of you who aren't the most familiar with Mike Babcock's coaching career, he started off coaching the Anaheim Ducks in 2003 and immediately took them to the Stanley Cup Finals where they eventually lost. Then, in the 2005-2006 season, he took over as the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings, where he would spend very many seasons. He coached there from 2005 to 2006 till the 2014-2015 season. His time there was highlighted by a 2008 Stanley Cup win and a 2009 Stanley Cup final appearance. Over his time coaching there, he would have the opportunity to coach a lot of great players, and one of those players was Mike Modano. Mike Modano spent his entire career with the Minnesota North Stars and then the Dallas Stars whenever they moved. Then, in his final season, he decided that he wanted to play for his hometown, Detroit Red Wings. Going into that season, he just needed to play 41 more games to hit 1,500 career games. Mike Modano might not have been as good as he once was, but he was still a good asset for the Detroit Red Wings to have, and everyone knew that all he needed was those 41 games to hit the 1,500 career milestone. Babcock would end up scratching him a lot that season, and because of this, he only ended up playing 40 games, ending his career total at 1,499. Modano has even come out and said that this is something that really bothers him, and he wished he could have hit that milestone. This move apparently also angered a lot of the veterans that were already in Detroit, and they wanted to see him hit the milestone. But during his time in Detroit, Babcock also decided to go after another player, and that player was Johan Franzen. Johan Franzen was a big member of the Detroit Red Wings until he retired in the mid-2010s. He was in Detroit over the entire tenure of Mike Babcock's time there. During Game 5 of the 2012 playoffs against the Nashville Predators, an incident occurred between Mike Babcock and Johan Franzen. During this time, Johan Franzen was already dealing with symptoms because of a concussion, and one of those symptoms was depression. According to Chris Chelios, on the bench, Mike Babcock verbally assaulted him in front of everyone, and then continued to do it behind closed doors as well. Johan's head was already not in a good place due to the concussion, and this led to him having a giant mental breakdown and panic attack. According to Chris Chelios, it was one of the worst things that he had ever seen over his time in the NHL. Due to this incident and just more run-ins with Mike Babcock being the coach, Johan Franzen has come out and said that he hated going to the rink every day because of him. Thinking about that whole incident is just sick and very manipulative of Mike Babcock. If Babcock had an issue with Franzen, it should have been taken care of behind closed doors and not in front of everyone on the team, in top of a playoff game. Franzen was already going through a really rough time dealing with the post-symptoms that come from a concussion, and having this happen to him just mentally broke him for a long time. Another player that he angered during his time in Detroit was Mike Commodore. Mike Commodore was a member of the Detroit Red Wings and played under Babcock. Commodore blames Babcock for ending his career. After he signed with Detroit, Babcock barely played him. And while that might not be an issue with most people, whenever you're a fringe NHLer, it can have a lot of bad effects on your career. Commodore would eventually be traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning by Ken Holland, and he states that it was kind of a pity move for him because he wasn't being played under Babcock's system. The main thing with Mike Babcock is that he either picks on the young players or the fringe NHLers. On top of that, he also goes after the NHLers that are on their way out the door of the league. It's not just a one-time thing, as we see this continue to happen and happen again. Now let's go to another story from his time in Toronto involving Mitch Marner. The next sickening Mike Babcock story comes from his time in Toronto with Mitch Marner whenever he was 19 and a rookie, and Babcock made him make a list of every player on the team and how hard that they worked. Especially when you're young and trying to make an impression on the team, having something like this happen can be very bad for you. Of course, Marner put himself as the least working person on the team, but after that, he had to make the list with everyone else. Two players that he put as the least working were Nazem Kadri and Tyler Bozak. Marner thought the list would remain private between him and Babcock, but Babcock decided to read it in front of the entire team. Eventually, Bozak and Kadri found out about the list, and they weren't mad at Marner at all, they were mad at Babcock. The whole experience eventually led Mitch Marner to tears in front of the entire team, and it was something that was really bad and traumatizing for him. It later came out that apparently he did this exact same exercise to one of the other young players in the Detroit Red Wings, but I don't think that player was ever revealed. With all that out of the way, we can now get to his time with the Columbus Blue Jackets, which was very short. The dude didn't even get to make it to a preseason game, which I think is absolutely hilarious. Paul Bissonnette broke the story last week in an episode of Spittin' Chicklets, where apparently Mike Babcock was going through young players' phones and looking at all of their pictures and text messages and other stuff. After that episode came out, damage control was being done by the Columbus Blue Jackets, and Mike Babcock and then Boone Jenner released statements. Other players like Johnny Gaudreau were eventually asked about their experience with Mike Babcock so far, and they were positive. But if you remember from the other stories, he doesn't go after players like them. He goes after the fringe NHLers as well as the young players. Due to the allegations being thrown out against Babcock, the NHLPA decided to do a deep dive into this situation. Everything seemed fine, and then they decided to talk to the young players, and apparently that's when things got bad. Just like Johnny Gaudreau and Boone Jenner said, there was meetings where Babcock only asked to see pictures of the players' family, but those weren't against the young players, those were against the stars on the team. Away from a team facility, Mike Babcock took young players' phones and apparently went through their camera rolls, apps, and messages. And because they're young, they were too scared to speak up until eventually one of them said something to Paul Bissonnette, where he eventually broke the story. And as you can currently tell, the allegations were true, and Mike Babcock lost his job yesterday to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And quite honestly, I really do think this will be the last chance that he gets in the NHL. This time, he didn't even get to make it to a preseason game before he started acting up, and I think that should be enough of a death sentence for him. Although it might not be at the rate that many people want, the NHL is evolving, and these old minds are slowly being pushed out of the game. And if Mike Babcock wants to continue with his old ways, it isn't going to fit anymore in the NHL, and players are letting him know that. Personally, I don't think he wants to change his ways, though. Even after he resigned, he released a statement where he never apologized for what he did during the Columbus Blue Jackets meetings. His lack of accountability should be damning enough, and that should be the last thing that he ever gets to do in the NHL. He might have been a good coach at one time, but he's past his expiration date, and there's no room for him in the NHL anymore. But let me know what you think about this entire situation in the comments below. While you're down there, leave a like on the video because it'll really help me out, and consider subscribing. I pump out plenty of NHL content every single week, whether it be shorts or long-form videos, so there's something that you'll definitely enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.